So there's a few more sutta excerpts that we have here, and these, they cover various topics, which we also addressed in some of our previous talks, but it won't hurt to go through it again, maybe say some other things about it, help people think about it from a different angle. So the first excerpt is from Anguttara Nikaya 668, and it goes, Bhikkhus, that a bhikkhu takes pleasure in company, who delights in company, who is engaged in the pleasure of company, who takes pleasure in groups, who delights in groups, who is engaged in the pleasure of groups, that he will find pleasure in seclusion when alone, that is not possible. Not finding pleasure in seclusion when alone, that he will pick up the sign of the mind, citta nimitta, this is not possible. Not picking up the sign of the mind, that he would fulfill the right view, that's not possible. Not having fulfilled the right view, that he would fulfill right composure, the samadhi, that's not possible. Not having fulfilled right composure, that he will abandon the fetters, that is not possible. And not having abandoned the fetters, that he will realize nibbana, that is not possible. So, the whole point here, as it can be seen, is that one needs to have grasped, picked up sign of the mind. Now that might sound sort of mystical to somebody, but sign of the mind, citta nimitta, literally means the characteristics, signs, tokens of that which mind is. So not having the sign of the mind, that's the state of an average person's mind. So you need to delight, you need to first make effort to avoid company, dwell in solitude, and then find pleasure in that seclusion. So literally start preferring seclusion over company, regardless of the company. Even if it's the best possible company, you would still prefer seclusion. So that is a necessary basis to start picking and discerning these characteristics, tokens, properties of that which mind is. So that, and the important difference here, it's not like that you would sit down and psychologize and sort of contrive these various properties that you think belong to the mind, but genuinely discern them for what they are on the level of the mind. So you're not putting them there, you're seeing them for what they are. So you're looking for the properties of the mind, which means you're developing basically a certain recognition of that which mind is, because mind is defined by its properties, the sign of the mind. So you want to, how to discern the characteristics of the mind, you need to have been dwelling in solitude and not in company for a sufficient amount of time. Probably work through boredom, anxiety, restlessness, and all the other hindrances. Once you have worked through it, you start developing, you start preferring that solitude. You start developing the pleasure in it, in that seclusion. And on account of that, or around, let's say around that time, you could then start, well, by that time you would be more familiar, let's put it like that, with that which mind is, because you wouldn't be distracting yourself from it, you wouldn't be engaging with sensuality or in company, so you leave yourself no other choice but to be living with your own mind. And if you start living with your own mind, which is what most people avoid on the day-to-day basis, if you start living with your own mind, you will then start discerning its inherent characteristics. And that is the necessary basis to become a Sotapanna, to develop the right view. There is no right view without that sign of the mind, without knowing what the mind is, without seeing it as a phenomena. It's impossible to develop the right view unless you know exactly what your mind is. As in, understand it, see that sign of the mind. Oh, this is what mind as a phenomenon, as a thing is. And if a person is puzzled, like what is there to understand? Well, see, most people's views about the mind are the views that they're derived from the senses that then you apply to your mind. That's why often people approach mind scientifically, medically, even psychologically. But none of those things are the mind. Mind precedes those things. So you cannot accurately discern, see them present as they are, characteristics of the mind, by using the sense data and input of your senses, because the mind does not appear in any of the senses. So what is then the mind? There's nothing mystical. If something's mystical about it, it's because the whole direction is too opaque, because of the people inevitably sort of spending their life distracting themselves from their own mind. So the slightest thought in the direction of what the mind might be on its own terms, it's just overwhelmingly ambiguous. So that's why it's so hard to see the mind and understand the mind, as the Buddha said in the other suttas. But in order to do so, you need to do so if you want to get the right view. So not picking up the sign of the mind that Bhikkhu would fulfill right view, that's simply not possible. It's inconceivable. And that should also shed some light on people who kind of can't help but hope for some special experiences to come out of their meditation or practice and so on, including like the attainments of the Sotapanna and higher. More often than not, it's assumed to be this overwhelmingly kind of entering this experience, and you can't put it into words and so on. But whatever that experience might be, you want to ask yourself, well, have I understood mind as a phenomena on account of which I had this experience? And if you can't put it into words, it means you haven't understood it, as simple as that. So whatever experience it was, doesn't matter how pleasant, how uplifting, how out of this world it was, it's irrelevant. It's not the experience you should be seeking out. If it happens, not your problem. What you want to seek out is understanding the sign of the mind. Thus, you can develop and understand the right view. And that's not given. That does not occur spontaneously. That occurs through your own effort of that development. So, fulfilling then the right view, or rather not having fulfilled the right view that he would have samadhi, that's not possible. So that's another thing. Very common misconception is that you can do samadhi correctly, you can practice Buddhist meditation correctly, knowing that you don't even have the right view. And then usual argument for that is, well, my meditation helps me. Nobody says it's not helpful, but it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's on the level of freeing you from suffering that the Buddha said is the beginning of the Dhamma, Sotapanna. That's the level you should be aiming for. So that you can practice samadhi without Sotapanna, it's not possible. That you can practice correctly. So if you don't have the right view, it doesn't matter how helpful your samadhi is, it's not the right samadhi. Because right samadhi is not determined by what you deem helpfulness is, it's determined by the right view, which is determined by grasping the sign of the mind, discerning the mind as a thing, as a phenomenon, on its own terms, which is determined by finding pleasure in seclusion, not just forcing yourself in seclusion, which is determined by not being engaged with groups, not delighting in groups, not delighting in people, not delighting in camaraderie, in company, in hanging out, and so on. So having developed the right view, you can then develop the right samadhi, because that's basically what right samadhi is, composing that right view to the extent necessary for final knowledge, for arahantry. That's what it says. Furthermore, not having fulfilled that right samadhi, that monk would abandon the fetters, i.e. become an arahant, that's not possible. Not having abandoned the fetters, that he will realize nibbana, that's not possible. So then consequently, just goes the other way. Bhikkhu who doesn't take pleasure in company, doesn't delight in company, isn't engaged in company, it is possible for him to find pleasure in seclusion when alone. finding pleasure in seclusion when alone, that he will pick up the sign of the mind. That is possible. It's not guaranteed. He needs to make the effort, but it is possible because there is a basis. There is a fertile basis for him picking up the sign of the mind. Picking up sign of the mind that he will fulfill the right view, that is also possible. Having fulfilled the right view, that he will fulfill right samadhi, that is also possible. Having fulfilled the right samadhi, that he would abandon the fetters, that is possible. And having abandoned the fetters, that he will realize nibbana, that is possible. So that's why and this applies to lay people and monks, well, obviously to monks, but it applies also to lay people. And any time that you have to practice the Dhamma, to reflect, to read the suttas, to study, you should try and do it alone. You should start cultivating seclusion. Any chance to take a break from your life, in a sense of a retreat or going away from the usual busy environment, you should strive for the environment that would be solitary, because it takes effort. Like these things that are described in this sutta, they're not automatic, as I said before. So it's not like you just need to extract yourself from the company and you will then automatically start finding pleasure in seclusion. No. You cannot be in the company. You can be sort of separated from the group, but you would still be valuing that as a pleasure. You would still be valuing company as pleasant. You would still be carrying mental delight in company, even if you're not engaging in it physically. So you want to make the effort to uproot the pleasure that you find in company. And for that, you need to be alone. Having uprooted the pleasure that you find in company, then you can start finding pleasure in seclusion. Again, it's not automatic. So it needs work. You need to put in the work in order to start regarding seclusion as pleasant, feeling it agreeably. If you don't put in the work, it will not be agreeable. And you know whether it's agreeable or not if when you are secluded, just see what your mind does. How are you reacting? Are you looking for distraction? Are you bearing? Are you feeling like you're drowning? Or are you really, really at ease simply by being alone? Well, that's what you should be striving for. So you realize even before you get to the point of picking up the sign of the mind, as this sutta describes, you already have to put in a lot of work, a lot of enduring, a lot of withdrawal, a lot of reflection. And that's just in order to find pleasure in seclusion. And then you can pick up the sign of the mind. It will basically outline itself. And then you get to discern it. The characteristics of the mind. Then you get to know the mind at the time, in whatever state or mood it is, for what it is. So that's another then layer of work and effort you have to apply. And then goes to the right view, which is described in the suttas obviously in different ways, but it's usually the four noble truths: understanding the way of suffering, understanding the nature of suffering, the escape from it, and so on. But the point is, none of these things occur to you spontaneously. None of these things can occur just against or out of your will or outside of your will. And certainly none of those things can occur out of your meditation. Because as the next line says, meditating rightly without a right view is simply not possible. So your meditation, your seclusion, your striving, your effort, your study should all be pointing to one thing. There's no other alternative, by the way. They should all be pointing to getting the right view. Then you'll know what to do. And it's not like, oh, there's just one approach to the Dhamma. Like, oh, here we teach the right view. Somewhere else, no, there is nothing else you can teach. There is no Dhamma without the right view. So if the right view is not the goal, Dhamma is not the goal. As simple as that. And for those who wonder how fundamental the right view is, you can read Majjhima Nikaya Samaditi Sutta, the right view sutta. It determines the whole path, the right view. So it's not really optional. It's not really negotiable. And the reason why we keep insisting that it's important to kind of admit and keep admitting this to yourself, that without the right view there is no Dhamma. It's because it's so easy to develop a false sense of security. And yeah, I mean, there are teachings and meditation techniques and so on that can make you peaceful and help you, but it's risky in a sense that you can then easily jump into the view that it's because it's helpful, it's the right thing to do. But the only way to know the right thing to do is by having the right view. So that's what I mean. It doesn't matter what experiences you might be having on account of your seclusion, pleasant, uplifting, out of this world. The point is to know that it's about knowing the right view, not about experiencing random things. Because if you don't keep that context in your mind, if you don't keep reminding yourself of it, you will then develop a view that you know what's right, what's helpful, what should be practiced, while at the same time you don't know, you don't have the right view. And that's the fundamental contradiction. But because now you believe that you know, you won't be then making the effort to really find out what the right view is. Because you allowed yourself a concession that you can know what Dhamma is, you can practice what Dhamma is, you can practice meditation according to the Dhamma without having the right view. And that belief is basically a direct barricade to your progress towards the right view. Even if you do everything else rightly, having that belief will be the obstacle that will prevent you from the right view. Because it's a contradiction in terms, and if you don't abandon it, you will not be able to see it for yourself.